G'day, everybody. Welcome to SuperCoach 2025. Australia's biggest and best fantasy game is back. It's open to everybody. Get in and start picking a team. That's what I'm going to do here today. Its platform's been open for about 24 hours, so I've had plenty of time to think about who I want to start in my side this year. And obviously, if you sign up, very straightforward. It's free for everybody, and come up with a name and all those fun things, and then get onto this team screen ASAP, and we can start thinking about all of these players and who we want to fit in that $10 million salary cap. And there's lots of exciting new things about the game this year too. And probably the one that jumps out straight away if you go to that team screen is that if we scroll down to the bottom, there is a brand new position here called Flex. We're now selecting 31 players instead of 30, so still in that $10 million salary cap. So keep that in mind when you start picking players, or the prices have been adjusted slightly to help accommodate for that. But that's going to bring in a whole lot of new fun strategy and thinking into the game, but really also just a great backup during the year. If you have one of those rounds where a player gets injured very early in the game, or there's a late out that you miss, what comes with Flex is best 22 scoring. So of these 23 players on screen, on field, only 22 scores count each week. So your worst score will drop out. So keep that in mind maybe when picking a Flex player, but they can be from anywhere: defense, midfield, forward, ruck. And yeah, I've seen a few people come in with a few ideas about how we can make the most of it. So we'll get to that shortly about some of the different possibilities. But yeah, I love that aspect of SuperCoach this year. But the traditional way to pick a SuperCoach team is to start from the back line. So I think we can do that as well. And I'll just have a look at what my team looks like as of the end of January. No doubt will change a bit over the preseason, although maybe it's best to just keep a record of this, because sometimes you look back and think, geez, that team I picked right back at the start, actually, maybe I should have stuck with some of those early calls before you get bamboozled by everything else that happens in the preseason. But of course, there's lots of great advice during that time as well. So let's get into it and start picking a side. And my first picked player in defence is Harry Sheezel from North Melbourne. Just an absolute gun. He's averaged over 100, 118 in just his second season last year. How high can he go in year 3? I mean, it's really hard to put a ceiling on him. Last year, in the middle of the year, he moved from defence, where we know he was scoring really well, easing into his AFL career, moved into the midfield, and it took him a couple of weeks to adjust. But by the back end of the year, he was absolutely flying, scoring well over 120 in the back. I think the last month of the year, he averaged 130 points, playing really more of a mid-forward kind of role. So I'm not worried about where he plays. He's going to score fantastic anywhere on the field. Skipping Sam Flanders at this stage. Gold Coast has an early bye. Not 100% sure where he's going to play. So we'll just keep an eye on him early and see where he ends up. But my second defender, I'm going with two real, I guess, top-end primos in the back line. Jack Sinclair is the second one I've got here. The Saints have the best fixture with Freo. We'll get to them, of just about any team in the comp. No bye early in the year to worry about. That goes for Sheezel as well. I don't think we want to panic too much about who's got buys, but if you know someone doesn't have one at all, that makes the decision pretty easy. He absolutely flew home last year as well, averaged 120 after the bye. And this is probably affected a bit by the fact that I really wanted to get him in my team, and I just couldn't find a way to do it last year, and just had to watch his scoring go through the roof. So let's just get him in from the start this season. I like him playing more in defence, but he does always have stints in the midfield, and he's pretty good there too. So we'll see what Ross Lyon does. But like Jack Sinclair wherever he plays. Now I'm going to pick a third premium scorer, I guess, in the back line, and hopefully maybe saving a little bit of money with this pick. Scrolling down a little bit further on the list to a guy who has been a premium definitely in the past, and that is James Sicily. So you can see there he's 100 grand cheaper than Sheezel, priced at a 99 average that he scored last year. And that was really when he had to play key defence pretty much every week because Hawthorn had all his injuries in the back line. This year should be a different story. When they bring in a Tom Barrass, they bring in a Josh Battle, should free up Sicily to just float around. Maybe he gets a third forward that he can play on and just float off and take intercept marks, which is what scores so well for him in SuperCoach. The only worry is, does Sam Mitchell think, well, now I've got all these defenders, I can throw Sicily forward? Hawthorn's had a few issues finding goal kickers, and Sicily did that on occasion last year as a bit of a cameo, and it really worked. He actually scored more points doing that, getting some of those sort of key plays in close games in the forward line. So I'm not too worried if that happens occasionally this year. If we see signs in the preseason that he's going to play more permanently as a forward, then we'll abort this completely and come up with someone else, because I don't think he's going to score that many SuperCoach points if he plays forward full-time. But if he's just doing it on occasion, I'm not too worried. So I think there's great potential there. Hawthorn does have one of those early buys, but it's at the back end. I think I should be able to cover that without too much difficulty. As long as you're not having too many players off in 1 week, that's probably the main thing we need to keep in mind. And that is definitely a factor when I look at the next position on the field. And to me, this comes down to two guys who are both really, really cheap, very underpriced considering what we think they're going to score this year, and that is Callum Mills from the Swans and Kadeen Coleman from Brisbane. Kitty's even cheaper than Mills here, but I've gone with Callum. They both have a buy in round 3. Unfortunately, so do a bunch of other players that we're likely to pick as well. Collingwood, Geelong, Brisbane, Sydney all have the buy that week. So if we're looking at picking a Bailey Smith, for example, which most people will be, we are going to have a few players missing that week. So we don't want to have too many out. And both these guys present heaps of value in defence. You could start both. Kitty is cheaper, but he is coming back from an ACL that he did in opening round last year. So it'll be 12 months to the dot when opening round happens this year. And reports are that he's tracking pretty well to come back and play, but he is still, on a modified preseason. Callum Mills, on the other hand, had that ridiculous injury that he suffered at Mad Monday, and he did come in and play at the back end of last year and played in the finals. So he should have a complete full preseason. And what we're really looking for with him is, what does Dean Cox do with him? He's the Sydney captain. You think a real big point to prove, feels a lot of responsibility. What happened in the end with the Swans last year, and he didn't have the greatest year. So, which also contributes to his price. But what I would love to see is him playing as a full-time midfielder, which he has done before and scored really, really well. But I guess a bit of a problem from a Supercoach point of view is that he can play pretty much anywhere. So we just want to keep an eye on that. And with a new coach coming in, what exactly are they going to do with him? How are they going to use him? But I really like his scoring potential there in defence for us. Averaged over 110 a couple of times in his career. So, that would be absolute dream scenario. And I think he probably is a better chance than Kitty at being in my final team. He could be a top 6, top 8 defender. I think that's probably less likely than Dean Coleman. And even if he doesn't quite get to that, he'll hopefully make us a stack of money. So now we go down into the rookies in the last couple of spots in the back line. And so I suppose we've got 4 spots there to fill, which I'm looking at guys under 200,000 and try and find a couple of those who we think can score pretty well and play on the field each week. And the first one I'm putting on there, spending a little bit more than your bargain price rookies, is Toby Travalia from St Kilda. He was there, actually, I think he was their second pick in the top 10. They had 2 right at the back end of the top 10. Alex Taru is still injured, so we're just not worrying about him at the moment. But Travalia was their next pick, and he's looking fantastic from all reports down at RSEA Park over preseason, absolutely flying. I saw something that he's going so well, he might get a crack in the midfield early on. I'm actually perfectly happy for him to play halfback, which is what the talk has been, where he really was fantastic for the Bendigo Pioneers last year. Put up some great scores in the under 18s, obviously leading to him getting drafted. He averaged 143. There you go, playing halfback for the Pioneers in the under 18 comp. And what gives me a bit of confidence with him too is how well Darcy Wilson went for us last year as a rookie for the Saints. Ross Lyon obviously prepared to throw him in from round 1, give him a good role and good job security, and he was fantastic for us. Scored really well. Was one of our top rookies in terms of decent scoring and making heaps of cash through the year. So that's the model I'm hoping for with Travalia. We'll see how the roles play out at the Saints with a few moving puzzle pieces there with Josh Battle going out, obviously. McRae coming into the midfield. Where does Sinclair play? But I think there's a spot there for him. Riley Bonner's the other one who got a lot of games actually for St Kilda last year, especially earlier in the year, playing that sort of taking kick-ins, getting a lot of that distributor quarterback type stuff in the back line, and he was delisted, so he's not there at all. So that's a spot that needs to be filled straight away. So hopefully Travalia is the kind of guy who could do that for us. Now, another one who I've got on field, I reckon we can play him. We're making big calls in January, but again, reports really good. Sardell Hawley is going to be a very popular pick. I think this year he'll be really popular with Essendon fans, footy fans in general, and super coaches if he comes in and hopefully makes his debut in round 1. So he was picked up in the mid-season draft last year. Slightly mature age guy. He's 23, which we love, ready to go. And plenty of experience at senior level and in the VFL. Did some really nice things there and probably would have made his debut last year if he hadn't got injured, just being picked up. That was just after he got recruited in the mid-season draft, and then he only came back right at the tail end of the year. And the Bombers probably did us a favour by not playing him then when he wouldn't have really helped us much in Supercoach. And now we get him for the bargain price of 119,000. He's a DPP as well, dual position with the midfield. So keep an eye on Essendon track reports and obviously their preseason games, and we'll see if he's part of their sort of best 22, best 23. But the noises coming out of Tullamarine at the moment are all very positive about him. So, yeah, really, really happy and keen to see what he can do for us in Supercoach and for the Bombers this year. And there might be a few options down there. I did consider picking another Essendon player in defence who has been a staple in the past, who's hardly ever played. So we won't be picking him this year, but we'll see what he does early in the season. And his name totally escapes me at this point because I've got a couple of other guys that I've picked ahead of him. And another one is a mature age recruit, Riley Bice, picked up by the Swans in the draft. Another guy who really came out in the VFL last year and was a huge improver playing for Werribee that has given us some really good players who've come through the AFL as well. Sam Closey last year, an obvious example. So if he gets a game early for the Swans, he could be a really good pickup. Hard team to break into, and there are quite a few players they've got playing that kind of halfback role, Nick Blakey style. But if he gets a look in, he could be a good scorer. So just a preseason watch on him. Obviously, the rookies are all a bit of a guess at this stage. We'll get a much better idea as the preseason rolls on. And Zach Reid was the Essendon player, of course, that I was thinking of, and more good reports of him this preseason. So you never know, might end up picking him, but obviously he's been extremely injury prone in the past. But he was a high draft pick. You'd think they want to get games into him, and he's only 119,000. So we'll be keeping an eye on him. But in the last spot in defence, I've got at this stage, and again, we are just getting very speculative, but just a name to pencil into your black book to keep an eye on. James Leake at GWS Giants hasn't played at AFL level yet, but he was picked 17 in the 2023 draft. And just thinking that the Giants will want to get some games into kids, and there are spots this year in the side with a bunch of players leaving at the end of last year. Harry Perryman's gone to Collingwood, Isaac Cumming and James Peatling both left now at the Crows. So, and they're kind of half backs, these guys. So, someone like Stringer comes in, but they need to find some players to play in these roles. So it's the kind of thing Leake has done. He's sort of a midfielder, halfback type. And in rounds 17 to 20 in the VFL last year, he put up scores of 122, 123, 120, and 112 in the VFL. So no guarantees, obviously, with these young guys. But he's a name that I'll be keeping a very close eye on this year as a potential rookie pick for us in Supercoach. So that's my defence as it stands at the very, very early stage of the season. Now, jumping to the midfield, and I won't spend too long, and I'll chuck the first two guys in here because I've gone the two most expensive players in Supercoach, Zach Butters and Marcus Bontempelli, prepared to pay the money. There's a decent chance they'll get a little bit cheaper at some stage during the year, and I know some people don't like to pay that much, and you look for a bit more value and maybe try and pay, $650 or $600 if you can get them for that at some point during the season. But I just think at whatever time that is, you've missed out on all the points they've scored up until then. Still going to be a lot of money to try and find, and I'd just rather save the headache, save the trade, and put them in from the start. And they give you captaincy options as well, so you're effectively getting double points, which increases the value you get from them. Someone like Butters, I have had Nick Dacos in that spot for a fair bit of the preseason, but a little bit of talk he's on a modified program. He's got a little bit of injury niggles, and plantar fasciitis has been spoken of. Just scares me off a bit. Plus, again, don't want to put too much emphasis on buys, but when he's got a buy in round 3 with a bunch of these other guys that we're talking about, and Butters doesn't, it does make it a bit easier to pick Zach. So even though he actually finished last year, I think I was initially off him a bit just because in the finals he had 3 pretty average scores, but it came out later that he was playing injured really that entire time. And if you ignore those, and we're talking about Supercoach in the final 4 rounds of the home and away season, he averaged 133. So if he's anywhere near that, he's a guy we're definitely going to want to have in our teams at some stage. And let's get him from the start and just get all those points while we can. So similar theory here to defense, where I've gone spend up on the first 2 and then trying to get a third real primo scorer who'll be a keeper for me for the whole year, but maybe trying to spend a little bit less in that spot. And in this case, I've gone for Andrew Brayshaw. So mentioned Fremantle's draw, which is very, very favourable with the fact that they've got a bye in round 13 with St Kilda. They're the only teams on the bye that round, so the easiest to cover, and they don't have a bye earlier in the year. So that makes them, guys that we do want to be having a closer look at. Again, finish the year really, really strongly. Caleb Sarong's another one you could definitely think of in around this spot in your team, but Brayshaw a little bit cheaper, priced at 110. I think he had a little bit of injury niggles earlier in the year and finished with 120 through average in the final part of the year after their bye. So he's definitely one who can put up those 110, 120 kind of scores, which we want from, I guess your M3 in the midfield. So he's one I really like to start the year. Was, really enjoyed watching him in that back end of last year when he was on fire. And he's done it in the past in Supercoach. One question mark over him maybe has been, is he a bit susceptible to a tag? But they seem to maybe more go towards Caleb Sarong now. So that frees him up to even score more points for us, which is fantastic. Now, this is a spot where we're going to go for some mid-price magic because there are plenty of options this year, and around this sort of 400, 350 to 450 kind of price range, there's a bunch of guys you could really consider. And why is he not coming up when I search for his name in here? The one I want. is Clayton Oliver. 451,000 just seems ridiculous next to his name. We know last year he was right off his game, average only in the low 80s, which is just nuts. He hasn't done that since he first came into the AFL. Usually a 115, 120 average guy, so reliable. And obviously a bunch of things went wrong for him last year. Didn't have a preseason at all, really. Had injuries during the year as well. Melbourne, had all kinds of dramas. So he's back training. The signs early are positive. If he averages, will he get back to 110, 120? Obviously, that'd be amazing to just have him there all year starting at that price. Probably more realistic that he may be a 1.5, 110 sort of guy. But that price, you definitely take that. If he slides down the list and in the end is your last midfielder, then I think you've done extremely well to get him that cheap. So we will be watching him very closely. There's some other guys like, Adam Chera, I think could be great value around a similar price. Will Ashcroft is going to be one that's really popular as well, almost identical price to Oliver. Yeah, how many of them can you start with? You could pick one or two or three. So that's going to be a really interesting question around selection this year in SuperCoach. And Ashcroft buy maybe put me off a tiny bit, but reading the Phantoms read up about Will Ashcroft's numbers and what he did obviously in the final series and where he's priced at. He's going to be a really great option around that price bracket as well. But can't fit him in at this stage. You can't pick everybody. I'm going down to it is another mid-pricer, but cheap enough that I think even if he doesn't end up being a keeper, could trade him at some stage later in the year and make a bunch of cash, make 150,000 out of him, and then turn him into a primo. That'd be a pretty great result if James Peatland can do as well as I hope he can, coming over from the Giants to the Crows in the trade period. Priced at this average of only in the 60s, and I'm expecting he'll average over 90 this year, which is what he did at the Giants when he got an opportunity to play midfield. When he wasn't the sub, he was the sub 7 times last year. So obviously, you don't think that'll happen to him in Adelaide. I think he'll play midfield most of the time, maybe more of a sort of a defensive midfielder. We know he's a great tackler, which is good for SuperCoach numbers. So, expecting a huge bump in output from him. So, should make plenty of cash. I guess it's just a question of, does he make a bit of money and average, 85, 90, and then he's an okay selection, or does he really go really well and average 100, and then you sort of got the dilemma in the middle of the year of do you keep him or do you trade him? So if we get to that point, I think that'd be a great result for us. So it's a bit more mid-price action there in the midfield, and this year there's just so many mid-prices to choose from. But they're the two that I'm looking at. I mean, Isaac Cummings, another one at the Crows, who's even cheaper than this, but maybe doesn't quite have the same scoring potential, and he has had some hamstring niggles in the past, and he's already had a few little scare in the preseason. So, but he's definitely another one who's on my radar. But down into the final 3 spots on field in the midfield, and now we're into rookies again. And the great thing here is that the draft class last year was so strong that I think we can confidently pick 3 rookie price players to play on field and should give us pretty good scores, certainly in that early part of the season when we need them from these rookies. And the first one is Jagger Smith. The Blues, manipulated some great moves to get high up in the draft and grab Jagger at pick 3. He's just been a ball magnet all through his junior career, averaged 135 in the under-18s, and he played 3 games last year for Richmond's VFL team and averaged 103 in those, playing against the bigger bodies, even though he's a pretty skinny guy. So, he should be great for us. Just keep an eye on, what he's doing early on for Carlton, where they play him, but I think he will play early on, will be a very popular selection in SuperCoach. The other one next to him, similar, reasoning really is not Connor Nash. I don't know why that's come up because I don't want to pick him, but I will pick Levi Ashcroft. You could pick both Ashcroft. I mentioned Will early on. Levi obviously a lot cheaper. Slipped a little bit, maybe you could say, to Brisbane's first pick in the draft at pick 5, which shaved a little bit off his SuperCoach price. So that's good for us. Obviously, they got him as a father-son. Just monster numbers wherever he played as a junior. He played 1 VFL game last year, scored 149 in that, average 152 in the Coates League playing under 18 level. So the only question on him is he's coming into a premiership team. Does he walk straight into the team? Where does he play? Probably not exclusive midfield. Could he be the sub? There's a few little question marks, so something to just watch over the preseason. But if he gets a go, I think he's going to score. We're not worried about it from that point of view. Sid Draper's another one in this sort of top end draft bracket who'd be very popular and should play early for the Crows. But I'm just skipping on him for now and going down to my first Richmond player. Obviously, bit of a Richmond tragic, and they should offer some value for us in SuperCoach this year. And the number one, well, he wasn't their number 1 draft pick, but he's the top one who I think will be playing early and give us good value for money in SuperCoach, and that's Josh Smilly, big-bodied midfielder, huge. You see him in training, and the thing that just stands out is how tall he is. Long arms, so he should be able to get his hand on the ball. And at a few stoppages, that's what we want to see, get some Supercoach points. So, yeah, a few of those Richmond draftees are coming back from injury, or maybe some taller guys who take a little bit longer, but he's the one that I think we can pencil in early on who should get games and should score pretty well. So happy to pick him in my midfield, certainly at this stage. Now, speaking of Carlton draft dealings, the team they obviously dealt with early on was West Coast, and West Coast will say, or hopefully feel, that they still did pretty well out of that deal because they got their man anyway a little bit later in the draft, a little bit later in the first round, and that was Bo Allen. And so that means he's a bit cheaper for us in Supercoach. He's DPP, which is nice. Can flip him with El Hawley. So, don't need to worry too much about that at this early stage of the preseason, but always nice to pick a few of those DPP guys. His numbers weren't as big at juniors, but he did play basically half a season last year in the waffle for, playing at senior level. So that puts him in great stead. You think he'll get games early for West Coast. They obviously need to get some games into their kids. So he's a good one to pick on your bench. Now, obviously, now we get into, a little bit more guesswork, a little bit more speculative and glass half full thinking with some of these rookies. And one who definitely falls into that category is Neil Erasmus at Fremantle. High draft pick, hasn't really got a look in at this stage. They're just a very hard team to break into, especially if you're playing in the midfield. He was a top 10 pick. He's been on the list for 3 years. Last year, he only got 4 senior games, but you'd think surely now they want to try and get him in. Maybe someone like Nat Fyfe is transitioning out of there. Get in some of the youngsters. This is what I would do, obviously, with my Supercoach head on if I was Justin Longmuir. But in the WAFL Waffle Final Series last year is where he really showed what he could do. Really set that alight with scores of 128, 117, 155, and then 125 in the grand final. These are Supercoach numbers. Playing against men in the Waffle, he won the Simpson Medal for best of field in the grand final. 26 disposals, 11 tackles, 6 clearances, 2 goals. So been looking up on a bit of Neil Erasmus numbers, but they look pretty fantastic to me at this stage. So happy to stick him on the bench, and hopefully he gets a crack early for Freo, and he's not the sub, and he can make us some nice cash, again with a little bit of DPP, which helps us out. And then just trying to find someone to fill that last midfield rookie spot, and there'll be definitely plenty of players, I'm sure, who put their names up over the preseason to take spots here on the bench, but purely on nicknames, I'm going with Cody Anderson from the Hawks. Dan Batten told us on a early podcast that his nickname is the Beast from the East, and when you see him, he's a pretty big-bodied guy. Think of that Patrick Cripps sort of mold, ready to just throw into the mid straight away, even at age 18 or 19, and win his own footy. So, which is what he did at junior level, I think, playing for the Eastern Rangers, where he got that nickname, averaged 119. I did see something today, though, in some preseason reports that he's training in the forward line, so that's not ideal. Again, Hawthorn, have a few players like that in the mids already, so whether he gets a crack early, we will wait and see, but just a bit of a holding pattern there in that on the bench, especially some of those last picks, in this case, in the midfield, but we'll stick him there for now. 113 is a pretty nice price point. So we go into the ruck, and it's going to be hard to overlook Max Gawn, just absolute king of Supercoach, has been for years, but has someone gone past him? Will he this year? I'm backing in Tristan Cherry, who was I got him, I think, with about 5 rounds to go last year, and he was unbelievable. Fantastic for the whole year. Went up about $200,000 in price. If you got him early on, well played for sure. Average 119, average 130 post by, obviously winning hitouts. Huge aspect of his scoring is his tackling. He averages over 7 tackles a game, which is massive for a ruckman. So, sometimes he wins the tap out, and if it doesn't go to a North player, he just smashes whoever grabs it. So, and then we get another stoppage. So it just all ticks all the boxes, and he gets around the ground, gets some marks, and picks up possessions as well. So lots of great ways to score. And you look at the North Melbourne list, I can't see anybody challenging him unless there's some kind of injury for that ruck spot, even coming in and, giving him a bit of a hand. Like you see, Tim English has Sam Darcy or Rory Lobb on the list who can play a bit of ruck, which maybe take away some of his points. That's just not happening at North Melbourne. So great option for us in Supercoach this year, I think, Cherry, and I'll get on him from the start. R2 is a really tricky spot. Do you go a Gawn, spend up? Marshall, they've just signed someone who can back him up, which we'll get to in a second. English, I've mentioned, probably is a bit underpriced this year based on a little bit of a down year, but I'm going down to Tom De Koning at Carlton, and this is really purely based on a scoring spree he went on in the middle of the year last year. In consecutive weeks, he scored 131, 140, 146, 176, and 128 Supercoach points. So, when you're doing your research, very easy to look at that and think this guy's going to score me 150 points every week. Very rarely actually pans out that way. And last year he only averaged 101. So obviously he wasn't doing that every week. Had some few injury problems, which we'll have to keep an eye on. And the other huge factor with him is that when he played with Mark Pitnet in the team as a number 2 ruckman, he only averaged 88. So massive difference. We don't any sign we see that Mark Pitnet's going to be playing next to him, then in the same team, then we can pretty much cross him off the list. So that's the huge watch there at Carlton. Be great if Michael Voss would give us a bit of an indication of what his plans are, because the worst case scenario would be TDK is named in the ruck solo round 1. We pick him in Supercoach, and then in round 2 or 3, in comes Mark Pitnet because Michael Voss thinks he needs a bit of assistance. So that would be a nightmare, result. But the upside is huge for TDK, so the value is potentially there. So certainly at this stage in January, prepared to have a crack at him. If it all goes pear-shaped, the other guy who's surprisingly maybe just a couple of grand cheaper is Sean Darcy at Freo. So he's just flying over to Qatar, I think, pretty much as we speak, to have some management on his knee, but he's looking super fit. So he's another one I might consider if I have to get out of TDK at the last minute. He's probably my backup there at this stage. But on the bench, we need to get him back in. This is actually a very slight change from the team that I've published on the website, and it's not a massive one because basically I'm picking a cheap ruckman, whoever the cheapest option is. And when I originally picked this team, when Supercoach opened early yesterday, this guy was not in the game, but he was added during the day after he got signed by St Kilda. So now we can put him in. Harry Boyd from the Saints won the McGarry medal in the Sandful last year. Mature age ruckman who they've signed in the SSP period, which means he's bargain basement, 99,000. His numbers in the Sandful were fantastic. Mature ager, ready to go. So it's just a question of what they do with Rowan Marshall. Is he just like replacement for Tom Campbell? He sits in the VFL and he's there if they need him, if Marshall has an injury or gets tired later in the year, or do they actually plan to, there's a world in which they play Harry Boyd number 1 ruck and Marshall as a forward, especially, a few moving pieces there, what's Max King looking like coming back from injury. So, if that happened, he could definitely score some points, and you could even make an argument, is it a waste having him sitting on the bench because, rookie rucks can score really well. So he's an easy pick there at 99 grand on the bench at this stage, but even if he's the backup at St Kilda, probably happy to leave him there in the hope that he does get a game at some point during the year. But one to watch during the preseason for sure. See what they plan to do, and I'm sure Ross Lyon will throw some things around. But for us to get creative and think what's he actually planning to do once the season begins. But Harry Boyd, could be a great addition for us in Supercoach. So keep an eye on him. Now to the forward line. How much money have we got left? It's not going to be a lot, I'm guessing. 2 million. Well, that's still all right, but not much money to spend on top end premiums, which is fine because there really aren't any top end premiums in the forward line. And the one guy who I think is going to be in a lot of teams, he's the most expensive price forward after just qualified for forward mid status. Champion Data giving him that DPP, which is fantastic. Is Jason Horne-Francis. I think a lot of people picking him, and I certainly have. Has been in various versions of my team since the team picker opened. Obviously, that's been great. Supercoach Plus subscribers get in early. So I've had a little while to fiddle around with things, but he's not actually in the current version of my team. So I think the Phantom's going to try and bail me up over this, I'm sure. But you can't pick everybody. Have I got enough money? He's the most expensive forward, even though he's not super pricey really when it comes to premiums. He averaged 99.7 last year. Can he improve on that this year? I think he will, but by how much? If it's only, by 5 points, maybe I can get him for 550 at some stage, when I start upgrading my team. So whereas when it comes to some of these other forward mid-price options, and there are so many grey ones, I think their price is going to, get out of reach pretty quickly. So I don't want to miss out on any of those guys. So the player that I've got here who's probably a little bit of a bolter, a little bit of a pod, potentially early doors, is Shea Bolton from the Tigers. So obviously watched Shea very closely over his career at Richmond. Now he's at Fremantle after that trade last year, which they gave up a couple of first-round draft picks for. So obviously they've got big plans. They think he's going to be a missing piece of their puzzle to jump from a team knocking on the door of the finals to really contending, which I can envisage happening this year with where Freo's list is at. And he just seems just such a fantastic fit for them. You've got your workhorses like Caleb Sarong, and he's just adds, a bit of an X factor on top of that. Playing probably will start mostly forward, but maybe injected into the midfield occasionally. but at that half forward spot, pushing up to stoppages, getting those inside 50s, score assists, things like that, where he can really score well. And have seen him do that in the past. He averaged 97 points a game just 2 years ago. Last year, only 77, which is why he's so cheap. I'm just going to ignore anything that happened last year at Richmond. Obviously, pretty forgettable season, and especially for someone like Shea, who was, potentially considering where he's going to be playing the next year. So I'm not worried about that at all. If you look at his ceiling, one of the highest ceiling players in the game, certainly in the forward line in that season, averaging 97, included scores like 158, 152, 151, 141. So when he goes off, he's a guy you really want in your team. And maybe with the flex, the best 22 scoring, if he drops a 50 or a 60, which he is prone to doing, if the rest of your team goes okay and you don't have an injury that week, maybe that's a score that drops out and it doesn't even count. So I think he could be great, especially early in the season. Freo has I mentioned already their fixture overall is great, but in the first 5 rounds, they play West Coast and Richmond. So some chances for some of those big early games when you've got the best 18 scoring, that can really be beneficial. We saw that last year. And the thing that really tips it for me is you look at his career numbers at Optus Stadium, where obviously he's going to be playing a lot this year. He averages 113 there. Clearly his best venue, more like 80 or 70 at Marvel Stadium or the MCG. So that's absolutely massive. He'll be playing there a lot. That rematch with the Tigers, I think it is round 5 in Gather Round, is in the Barossa Valley. So they haven't played there before, but last year his highest scoring game was in Gather Round when they played at Norwood, I think. So, maybe he doesn't mind playing in those off-Broadway venues in South Australia as well. So obviously looking at all the positives there for Shea Bolton, but obviously the big negative for me is he's not playing for Richmond anymore, but I think he could be a great pick. Will I have the nerve to keep him there round 1? We'll see how we go. And the temptation to go back to someone like a Horn Francis will be good, but I'd have to find some more money to be able to do that. So at the moment he fits in really nicely for me there. Happy to pick him at F1. Now the next couple of spots are 3 really I think are going to be pretty cookie cutter, you could say, going to be in a lot of teams. McRae is the first one. Jack McRae. Now it's St Kilda. I don't need to say too much about these guys. Was really on the outer with Luke Beveridge last year at the Bulldogs, but we know what he can do when he plays midfield. He scores. It's been just a top end mid for us in the past. Probably at age 30, he might not quite get back to that, but he's going to score well above what he's priced at. That price factors in. He was the sub 4 times last year for the Bulldogs. Absolutely crazy. He got 12% CBAs, so expect him to get much, much more than that at the Saints. And when he did go back to the VFL 3 times, which is hard to believe, he scored 155, 185 and 199 Supercoach. So, he's just a Supercoach machine when he gets the opportunity. And I'm sure he will at the Saints this year. They brought him in for a reason. Bailey Smith, similar story, goes down to the category. Scored pretty well in the midfield, not as high as McRae. Never quite cracked 100 average for a year in Supercoach, but I think he could do that this year playing, been question marks for a while about Geelong's midfield. They always seem to still finish top 4, so it can't be too bad, but there's a role there definitely for him. Missed last year with an ACL, but it happened very, very early on, so it's not like Kitty Coleman where he's pushing to get back for round 1. He's in full training and looking fantastic, so expecting great things from Bailey Smith this year. Now, former teammate at the Dogs of these guys was pretty much my first pick player when I heard he went to North Melbourne. And after that trade, his manager said, yep, he's already spoken to the coach, Alistair Clarkson. He's going to be playing halfback. That's where we want him. We know he scored well there in the past in Supercoach and North Melbourne halfbacks. I mean, you think of guys like Jack Siebel down there, Harry Sheasel, Colby McKercher, even Aaron Hall going back a couple of years. Even Zach Fisher almost put a few decent scores up for us there last year. So those guys just score points for fun. So the only potential question mark on him is there. Apparently there was a slight little hamstring tweak on his first day back for preseason training, so we don't want to hear anything like that, but apparently very minor. He's back running already, so be playing in the practice matches, so we'll get a good look at him then. But assuming he gets to the start line in round 1, can't see myself not picking Caleb Daniel, and he'll be a fun player to own this year in Supercoach. Could do what Jack Siebel did when he played that similar role. It was a similar price. I think he was about 270K, ended up averaging over 110 and being a keeper for us all year that year, Jack Siebel. So hoping for similar things from Caleb Daniel. That'd be an absolutely fantastic result. But even if he averages 90 and we trade him later in the year, still unbelievable value. So who else are we looking for in the forward line? Finish it off with a couple more value picks. And, in January, we can take some risks. And Tommy Lynch had 183 grand. Obviously, a bit of Tiger bias coming into play here too. Had horrible run the last 2 years with injuries. Has played only 8 games combined over the last 2 seasons. Looks great at the moment in preseason. Actually went down to Punt Road before Christmas and saw him running some laps, taking part in some match simulation, moving really well. Always the worry that his body will let him down at some stage now. but we just need him to get to, round 6, round 7. Hopefully he's made a heap of money by then. We can trade him out. And you say that, and then someone like Elliot Yeo, he had a similar theory last year, and he goes on and becomes, 110 scorer for the whole season. So Tommy Lynch probably not going to do that. The way Richmond we expect will be down the bottom of the ladder. Maybe not as many opportunities to put up some of the huge numbers that he has shown he can do in the past, but still should definitely score. This is cheaper than some of the rookies, cheaper than Sam Layla. Really not much to lose going in with Tommy Lynch if he is picked, and we'll see that Richmond plays first in round 1, so we'll know if he's in the team. So at the moment I think he's great value. Now to finish off the forward line, 3 more genuine sort of rookie picks, I guess you could say, and a DPP who hopefully gets a decent run with injury as well this year is Elijah Hewitt. At the Eagles, he was a high draft pick 2 years ago. He missed all of last year with foot problems. So that means he's very cheap to start this year. And again, as we said, West Coast need to play the kids. Hopefully he gets some games. He's a mid forward, 122K. Great option there. Not many reasons not to pick Hewitt at this stage. Isaac Kako is a mid forward in SuperCoach, which is great. But we expect him to play more as a small forward at the Bombers, where I think he'll be, the fans will love him. Very exciting. Maybe SuperCoach scoring will be a bit up and down, but at this stage, we're looking for guys who'll get games early, and I think he definitely ticks that box. We'll see if other cheaper players maybe come along during the preseason, but I like to have him there for now. I'm very happy with that. And Sam Davidson is my last forward. Just for me, is a classic Luke Beveridge player. We know he picks someone like an Anthony Scott or Lockie McNeil, mature ages from the VFL, and he plays them early, gives them good game time. So that's what we want from a SuperCoach rookie. And Sam Davidson was a 21-year-old playing in the VFL last year for Richmond. The Doggies picked him up in the draft. So he ticks some of those same boxes. And he mentions he won, the Fothergill Round Mitchell Medal, awarded to the most promising player in the VFL, age 24 or under. He won that last year. And when you look at some of the guys who won that in the past, Michael Barlow, all the way back a decade or so ago, Nick Newman, Luke Ryan, Sam Closey was the last winner. So all of these guys turned out to be great SuperCoach picks. I think the last 17 winners or something have gone on to play in the AFL. So just need Bevo to give Sam a go early. And I also love that his nickname is the Doctor. He's studying medicine. So Dr. Davidson will be a great favourite, I think, of SuperCoaches if he gets games, which I think he is a good chance to do that early on. So pencil him in at this stage. As I said, rookies, we can definitely chop and change those as we go on. Now, this leaves $377,000 to spend on the flex position. And as I said, with flex, can be anyone. Can be a defender, ruck, mid or forward. I think probably midfielders or rucks will be the really popular spot. Not much point picking another forward there unless it's a real value option, which is actually what I'm doing, come to think of it. A guy that I've seen in a few teams already is Matt Flynn at West Coast. So if you want a cheap ruck, he's probably the best one this year at this stage. Was injured all last year, came across from the Giants. If you can get back in and be the number 1 ruck, he should score well above what he's priced at here at 60, just the 260K. Just not 100% convinced he's going to do that. He's already had an injury problem, had to leave training the other day. Not sure how bad that was, but he's had a lot of injury worries. Is he a world beater even when he gets on the park? Will he be guaranteed the number 1 ruck spot? So a lot of unknowns there. So I'm a bit scared of him, but if he's got that role, he's picked him round 1, then probably he's going to be very popular. We could always go back there. But the one I've got at the moment in this spot is looking for another one of those value forwards. There's just so many. Can we squeeze another one in? And I have Mateus Philippou here from the Saints. Scored really, really poorly last year. He struggled big time in the first half of the year. Then he went back to the VFL, reportedly asked, play me in the midfield in the VFL. That's where I want to be, playing at AFL level. So let me learn that craft. And he did that, performed really well, came back in to the senior side with just a few rounds to go and played midfield and scored well. So unfortunately, he had another injury niggle at the end. So we didn't get as much of a look at him as we would like. But apparently not worrying about that at the moment. He's in full training, only 313K. Yeah, I mean, he's priced at 58 average. So I expect him to average well above that. Just maybe a question mark, does he average 85? And that's a great improvement. Or can he get up and average, around the 100 mark, which he did in a couple of games late in the year, which would be, an absolute rolled gold result. And he could be a finish, top 10 forward at that level. So always a chance. He's a very high draft pick. Very high hopes on him when he was picked in the draft at pick 10, I think, a couple of years ago. So he's another one I'd like to find a spot for, and flex gives me the opportunity to do that at this stage of the season. So that is my team. 63 grand left in the bank, which is a nice little bit of kitty to muck around with. Save the team, and we can have a full look at it here. We're going live here, aren't we? So if you've got questions, looks like there are some questions in waiting here to be answered. So I'll just run through a few of these just to finish us off. Who do we want to go with? So question from Jacoda here asking about Sam Layla. So he was the number one pick in the draft. And in recent years, number one picks have been great for us in Supercoach. You look at someone like a Harley Reid, scored really well. Obviously, Sam Walsh going back a couple of years. I just think Layla maybe will play a little bit forward early on rather than midfield. So I think Smilly will be chucked straight into the guts. But Sam Layla, I think they'll try and get games into him early if he's fit. He has been, he had a few injury issues during his draft year, so they're not going to rush him. But yeah, definitely one to watch in the preseason. But I think, Smilly is probably my preferred option there of those Tigers draftees early at this stage. But yep, definitely Sam Layla is one to watch as well. Thoughts on Brent Daniels here from Corey Blackledge, favourite here on all our Supercoach channels. I mean, he was remarkably good last year, put up some crazy scores at the back end of the year. I think he averaged about 90 for the season. He's not on my radar at this stage, I have to say. I think that was probably a little bit overperforming, shall we say. I think he probably dropped back a tiny bit this year. But, yeah, I mean, the forwards you can really, there's a wide range of options there. So there'll be a few. I think the McRae's, Bailey Smith, Caleb Daniels will be in most people's teams. But after that, pretty much go for your life, pick whoever you like. Rob Kennedy asking, worried about TDK and Pidnet. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a worry and something that I'll be watching very closely as well. Injuries up forward. Who's out injured? Carlton's already got a few injuries, haven't they? But hopefully none of those forward guys. Maybe Charlie Kerno's had a little bit of off-season surgery, but hopefully their forward lines are looking good and they don't have to play, TDK or someone as a key forward. So he's looking at Cherry and English. Yeah, don't hate that at all. I think English will be, priced pretty favourably, maybe around a 108 average. I think he can definitely go better than that. Sicily, Joel Ferguson saying he's going to play forward. Yeah, that is a possibility for sure. I just think he's so good in defence. Marshall's everything back there as a captain. Would you want to play him up forward full time? Not sure if I would do that if I was Sam Mitchell. Obviously, I'm not. And the way the Hawks structure up this year, they do have some more options down there in defence. So it is a possibility, a risk that I will be keeping an eye on. So, yes, definitely a red flag there on Josh Sicily. Angus asking about Travali. Yep, loves him as well. Great. Looks like Will Day. Yeah, that is a good comparison. So, love Travali. And Will Day is another name to keep an eye on too. He's underpriced in the midfield. I mentioned, the Ashcrofts and Cheras and these guys. So you can throw Will Day in that bracket as well. So, someone asking about Bo Allen, yes or no? Yes, saying no. Saying yes, I should say. In my team to start the year, Nathaniel, yes. Picking Bo. Flanders, though, no for me. I mean, he was so good last year. It's always hard with these guys who were, he was cheap last year, an easy pick. This year you have to pay 200 grand more for him. That's always a little bit more difficult, but given his scoring, no reason why you couldn't pick him. Where will he play? I think he'll probably play mid forward. He was great floating around in defence last year for probably half the season. This year they've got Dan Rioli and Noble comes in as well, so he probably doesn't have to do that. But he did go into the midfield, scored really well there, and by the last couple of rounds he was playing more in the forward line, but scored really well there as well. So it doesn't really matter. Gold Coast have an early buy, very early buy, first buy I think with GWS. But if you've only got one or two of those guys, you should be able to cover that, especially with best 18 scoring. So yeah, he could be a pod earlier in the year and a great scorer. So. One last question, Davidson mature age, 21, I think he is. So yeah, that's another, we always like those guys coming to Supercoach ready to play, less likely to be the sub, I would think, compared to, some of the first year kids who maybe still building up that tank at a full AFL preseason, only, coming new into the game. So that's another reason I like Sam Davidson as a forward line rookie. But, Dan Batten tells me he's one to watch. So that's good enough for me, a rookie expert. But again, rookies very much watch and see, and keep an eye on Rookie Bible and all the great resources we'll have for Supercoach over the preseason. There's going to be heaps of content, more video, more socials, more articles. So keep an eye on all that stuff. I can't believe I've gone 45 minutes, but that's what my team looks like at this stage of the preseason. Thanks for the feedback. Keep leaving comments below, like, subscribe, and if you're watching on Code Sports YouTube, this is where we'll have all our video content coming your way during the preseason and once the season kicks off. So just talking about some of our plans today, there's some really great things coming your way. So thanks everybody for watching. It's been really fun. We'll see. Yeah, maybe we'll just save this team and we'll see what it looks like in round 1 or maybe in round 10 when I've gone off the rails and I can go back and think this is what I should have done. But at the moment, looking great, and we'll try not to tinker too much. But stay tuned for more great SuperCoach content, and we'll see you guys soon.